All right, guys, today I want to talk about a veteran issue the Jazz have, as well as a new trade rumor at the end. Stick around. It's the Hoops Nerd Show. All right, guys, so the Utah Jazz have had a very clear direction this year. Really, two directives have been what they've wanted to do. The first has been they want to develop their youth. And basically, the secondary directive that comes from playing a lot of young players is a lot of losing that goes on for this Jazz. And what's the point? Well, the point is capture the flag. Utah would like to add a top-tier talent on this Utah Jazz team. The way you do that in Utah and in, honestly, the vast majority of markets in the NBA outside of the Lakers and the Miami Heat and the Houston Rockets and teams like that with more desirable markets for players is through the draft. But even those teams have to draft their players through the draft. Bam Adebayo in Miami. You saw that the Lakers drafted all their young guys that they eventually used to trade for Anthony Davis and, were able to bring over LeBron James. I digress. But anyways, for this Utah Jazz team, they have to bring on players through the draft. And to do that, they're playing young players to develop them so that after they lose all these games, those players are developed and can play with those superstars they bring in the draft, right? Well, that is going really well, but we're starting to see some repetitiveness from this Jazz team and some things they need to think about and fix here soon. Now, Utah has Keontae George lately, and for this entire season really starting. And at the start of the season, before he got injured in Game 3, was Taylor Hendricks. One of the downsides to his injury, outside of just how that sucked a lot for Jazz fans and obviously for Taylor Hendricks, since he loses a year of development, is that it brings in players like John Collins and other veterans that have kind of filled that role. Well, Utah did that for a while, and then it bit them because they started winning some games, put themselves at the 5 spot in the lottery, and have struggled to get back to the top. Now, the Jazz have been losing lately and have gotten closer to that top pick again, but they need to be careful because the thing that cost them a loss before against teams like the Mavericks, they beat the Knicks, teams they should have lost to, was because of a lot of veteran players playing that probably could be giving minutes to young players and develop for the future. Utah needs to be thinking about their future, and this is something they've got to watch. So, what am I talking about here? Well, basically, this is a pretty simple concept. This is the last game the Jazz played where they lost to the New York Knicks recently in New York, but we're seeing a trend that I think is something Utah needs to change. Look at this right here. These are the field goal attempts for the Jazz. When you look at the top field goal attempts, Lauri Markkanen's getting 22, Jordan Clarkson's getting 19. The first young player you see getting a lot of field goal attempts in this one, Keontae George. Who is the next player getting a lot of field goal attempts? Collin Sexton. Now, this is fine. If your veteran players are getting the most shot attempts, that's fine if you're a team that's winning a lot of games. If you are a team that is not trying to win games, that's trying to develop youth, and you have 3 of the top 4 players on your team getting all these shots, and those are veteran players, I would argue that this is not effective team building and roster construction for a team that's supposedly trying to develop players. Look, 6 field goal attempts, which is good. Johnny Juzang is a young player Utah has brought along that they're developing. Svi Mykhailiuk got 6 shots. He is a player that will be here for a year. He's not going to be here anymore. It takes a while before you get to Walker Kessler, Bryce Sensabaugh, Filipowski 5, Isaiah Collier 2. This is not what you want to be doing if you're the Utah Jazz. This is not effective use of minutes or of field goal attempts. Well, and minutes too, because all these minutes are going to these players. You know who you're not seeing on this list that game? Cody Williams. And Cody Williams has had some nice moments in the G League, but one thing that's going to help Cody Williams is getting minutes with these players. Now, some people would say, well, the best thing for someone like Cody Williams who's struggled is go to the G League. Maybe, but I would argue that the best way to find out if a player is ready when you bring in a superstar is give them minutes on an NBA floor. And if a player can't overcome issues during actual NBA games, that player might not be good enough to be in the league. We'll see. Let's go to the previous game for the Utah Jazz here on Basketball Reference. Shout out Basketball Reference, by the way. This was a loss to the Denver Nuggets. Utah was actually pretty close in this game. Here's where the Utah Jazz field goal attempts goes again. Look at this. Collin Sexton, 19 shots. Jordan Clarkson, 15 shots. Jordan Clarkson and Collin Sexton are not going to be on the Jazz in 2 seasons. They are getting all the shots. The third most shots. Lauri Markkanen, 13 shots. It takes you to Keontae George before you start seeing players, young players the Jazz are trying to develop before they get shots. And that's 9 for Keontae George. Then Johnny Juzang, then Kessler. And then we see Bryce Sensabaugh with 5 shots, Collier with 4, Cody Williams 3, Kyle Filipowski 2. This is fine if the Jazz are trying to win games, but at a certain point, Utah is really costing their young players developmental minutes. Someone could argue, well, guess what? These young players get to play alongside these players. I would argue that Collin Sexton and Jordan Clarkson taking shots to try to earn more money in their next contracts is not helping these guys. I would like to see Isaiah Collier getting more of these minutes. These 27 minutes that are going to Jordan Clarkson, who is taking 15 shots and taking all this time and minutes and opportunities from these guys is not effective for multiple reasons. One, it's less chances for these guys to figure things out, try some things that they could not be doing with those players on the floor. For example, I'm okay with Isaiah Collier taking a lot of shots and missing them. Collier needs to get those opportunities to make misses, have misses, however you say that, so that he can learn what he's good at and what he's not, and then he builds on that. But if everything that someone like Isaiah Collier is doing is just kind of handing the ball off to Jordan Clarkson so he can put the ball through his legs 2 or 3 times and take a bad shot, that's not really the best development. And I'd argue that Keontae George, his biggest examples of an NBA player have been Jordan Clarkson and Collin Sexton, 2 guys that haven't been the biggest examples of sharing the ball in their careers. Yes, they've gotten better under Will Hardy, which is a big shout out to Will Hardy and what he's been able to do to develop them, but it hasn't been the best example to Keontae George of what he needs to become as a player. So this is something that's going on with this Jazz team that needs to change. Yes, I am fine with Lauri Markkanen getting 13 shots, but the fact that Markkanen's getting less than Collin Sexton and Jordan Clarkson should be telling you something as well. The shot distribution is not good. And you can't blame Will Hardy for this because he is playing the players the front office has given him. What this is the Utah Jazz have a roster construction change they need to do to make sure that they get this team developing at a high level and also lose enough games to get a good pick in the NBA draft. The Jazz should absolutely be trying to get the worst record in the league so that when lottery night comes, the worst they can do in this draft is fall to 5. And obviously, if you get to number 1 and you win, that's an absolute home run. So this is the change the Jazz need to do. Now, let's talk about that Utah Jazz rumor. All right, guys, shout out to David J. Smith, an incredible Jazz follow. He listened to the Jake Fisher NBA rumors chat, and Jake Fisher gave a new rumor today about Collin Sexton and Jordan Clarkson being available, probably because the Jazz know and are seeing exactly what we are. When Jordan Clarkson and Collin Sexton are leading your team in shots, probably a time to make a move if you're trying to develop the young players on that same team. But what's interesting, he says, is the Jazz prefer to keep Walker Kessler. It would take a major package to entice them to move him. I'm going to say this. We saw this same kind of messaging last year, pretty much identical. We got rumors about Sexton and Clarkson to the point where I was pretty sure Clarkson was going to get moved. Remember the rumors connected to the Knicks didn't end up happening. I think at some point this trade deadline, Utah does trade Collin Sexton and or Jordan Clarkson. It just depends. Obviously, another team has to make that happen. I think Collin Sexton, who is having a good offensive season, no question, has a lot of value. And it doesn't say that the Jazz are going to make a require a huge offer for him, and it's probably going to not be all that. I mean, I think Jazz fans are probably going to be a little disappointed for how much Sexton gets, because I think he has less value than Jazz fans think. The amount of money he makes is actually very tradable because it's not a crazy amount, but Sexton is not a good defensive player. As good as he is offensively, he grades out really badly defensively. He's part of the reason the Jazz are number 30 in the NBA in defense. And so I think Utah is probably very likely to move Collin Sexton and Jordan Clarkson, but more likely probably Collin Sexton to just free up minutes for their young players, which will ensure more losses and will also help them develop. On top of that, the reason I say we saw this last offseason, how many rumors did we do about Lauri Markkanen with this same type of messaging? Utah has, put all the rumors out there about Lauri Markkanen, or maybe those came from Golden State and the team's trying to trade for him. But every rumor we got, it was not refuted. The whole messaging the whole time with Lauri Markkanen last offseason was that it's going to take a big package to get him. Eventually, we found out that was at least 3 first-round picks, maybe 4, and a good young player to develop. Well, with Walker Kessler, I doubt it's that much, but we have heard the rumors before that it would take 2 first-round picks. Danny Ainge has likely told teams that's what it is. He's going to see if someone bites, but they have to be good first-round picks. They can't be trash picks, because they're not going to trade Walker Kessler for nothing. And he may be just a big-time part of what this Jazz team does down the road. If Utah wins the lottery and gets someone like Cooper Flagg, they would absolutely love to have someone like Walker Kessler already in the building to help this team win right away. All right, guys, that's all I got. That's the Hoops Nerd Podcast. If you're new here, make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, and if you'd like to support what I do along with the All-Stars on this team, make sure you join the channel. I'd really appreciate it. Guys, I will talk to you next time.